Oh, okay. So I'm listening to the Bustamantes on Everyday Spy. They are former CIA case agents. They are now running a company that helps people to apply the skills they learned in the CIA to everyday life. And I'm completely hooked. I've been binging this. And Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith here, um, she said that she was talking with a friend who's feeling really distraught and overwhelmed by all the stuff that's happening in the world. And I had to pause and jump over here to capture the thought because I feel so much compassion. I feel so much pain. I feel so much. It's my fellow humans, right? This is what we're talking about. We're not just saying these are numbers, these are others elsewhere. This is our fellow humans. This is people who feel what I feel, going through things that I'm so grateful that I don't have to contend with, my loved ones don't have to contend with. So there's no lack of feeling, there's no lack of wanting to move to help my fellow man. But I don't know what it is I could conceivably do for anybody if I'm caught in a sense of helplessness and despair and I'm distraught. This isn't going to change anything. What I can do is affect what is within my reach because here's the thing. Something's going on in the world and people want me to take action. I'm like, okay, but when are we leaving? What do I need to pack? Where are we going to arrive? Who's going to guide us when we get there? What's the mission? Right? I want to know what we can really do, and maybe that's my pragmatism flaring up. But I do feel like if you're saying to me that people are suffering and we need to do something, you kind of not going to need to get boots on the ground in most cases. And if you do, there's a really high probability that you're not going to be equipped to help, and you might even become a liability. So let's say stuff kicked off in the Ukraine, and I heard about a bunch of soldiers who went over to volunteer. They were even equipped, but because they were basically just then conscripted and trapped, they became a liability to our people, right? So somebody then had to worry about negotiating their safe return or going in to extract them. So even though they were trained and equipped to go and help people, because of what happened when they got there, they became a liability to their own people who then had to worry about their safe return. So, could you imagine the person who's standing in the checkout lane living a day-to-day life being like, oh, I see this thing on the cover of the news and I need to go and do something about it? Well, obviously, you're not going to likely get on a plane and go. And if you do, you're going to become a liability to your own people because now it's going to be negotiations that may cost somebody else something else, just to assure your safe return. So it's a net negative in that case, even if it's net neutral. You've gone and pulled your life up to go and do a thing, right? And let's say you have the sense to say that's not the effective move here. I'm going to take action politically. I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to do these things. The impact that has in a world that is absolutely flooded with noise on the lines because of so many people wanting to be, to make a difference. And we can make a difference, but I don't think that going out and demonstrating at this point in history is really going to have the impact on lawmakers that's going to affect policy to the extent that anything's really going to change in these situations that are heartbreaking. They're inconceivably heartbreaking. And I need a moment with that because I really do feel it. I'm not callous. I'm not indifferent to this. Yeah, sit with it a minute. It feels awful. But here's the thing. If I surrender to the awfulness, that just means the bad guys are conquering another spirit. And so much is won through hearts and minds. And even though that's been abused to death as an expression, it's true. It's true. And if you surrender your heart and your mind to the horror of it and to feeling helpless and to feeling like I should do something, you're going to be weaker where you are needed. And your role, your place is to serve in the capacity that you are capable of serving in the place where you are, to the farthest extent that your reach can influence, right? That's how we make a difference in the world. We stand where we are, we take what we have, and we spread it out as far as we can. And in so doing, we are actually creating little microclimates all along the big grid of humanity. Humanity is just one big net, right? And within that grid, we are each a node, and we each have a location and a function. And if we honor and serve that, we can keep our part of the grid strong so that when other parts of the grid go down, there's something holding the whole system aloft. And that is probably the most we can do. Now, to speak to the sense of helplessness, that's a natural reflexive feeling. If you have compassion for your fellow man, it's of course you see children suffering and people starving and bloodshed and terror. Of course that moves us. But here's the thing about it. There's something unhealthy in us that tells us we are responsible for what happens to other, well, I said children, so let's put that aside, but other adults in the world. Wars are a matter of adults not being able to work it out, and then children get caught in it. And that's what really makes this messy for most of us, because we're like, I don't know about you guys, you probably both wrong, but the children, it still applies that we have to remember that this is an adult matter between adults who are responsible for those children. And in a way, yes, we are too. As I said, we're one network. Those are our people. But we have to operate from where we are, right? And so in order to honor and serve that correctly, we have to understand that other people are required to do the same. And by running to change what they're doing, we don't even know what's for the best. We don't. We think we can go and apply what's worked for us in one context and bring it to another group of people and say, hey, look, isn't life better when you follow this faith, you wear these shoes, you speak these words this way, right? How much history of colonization has shown that when we know better than the primitive people we're civilizing, that's usually not the case. It's usually not that we do know better and that what we have to bring is going to be of that kind of benefit to them. And right? So what do I know about what's good for other people in other places? I don't. I just know that they have to work it out, and the people who are holding up the grid closest to them. So let's say this is Canada. Maybe we do take a role because it is sort of within our reach. It's right there and it could affect us. So at that point, our part of the grid would activate to respond to the breakdown in the adjacent part of the grid. That's a little bit different. That's when you do start to consider whether or not there's responsibility. But the first premise is that we have to be responsible for ourselves, and we have to behave as though everyone else is going to do the same, knowing they won't. But we have to conduct our own part according to, I keep my lane, you keep your lane. I can't jump out of the driver's seat, get in somebody else's car, and make sure they don't veer into mine while I'm operating my vehicle safely, right? So this is the level I'm talking about with this, that when we feel helpless, we need to realize that we are. And in accepting that reality and turning to say, where are we not helpless? Where do we have power? What good can we affect? And how does that fit with the larger picture? By creating a functional reality around us, we create havens for people who are living in the dysfunction, because most of the people we know who are affected by this are just like us. They're not policymakers, they're not tycoons, they're not warlords. They're just people trying to do their day-to-day thing for themselves, for their families, whatever, for their communities, their religious organizations. They're just part of a larger system, and not just, they are part of a larger system that is so essential to how everything else works in this world. And I think of the phrase, no small parts, just small actors, right? So people are like, well, that's not really making a big difference. It's making the most crucial difference if we all hold it down. If you think in terms of how the military works, could you imagine the general being like, I think I'm going to be cooking today? Or the private being like, I think I'm going to determine what our strategy is for this next leg of the mission. It's not how it works. We have our place, we have our purpose. And I'm not saying we can't move through the ranks, so to speak, but there's a process and there are skills required and there are circumstances under which that is possible and sound. And I think we're trying to jump out of our roles and jump ranks and play parts that aren't ours. And not only is that more than likely going to affect nothing for the good, it is quite likely going to cause new problems, create a new liability. And I guess the reason I can get through my day and have peace at the end of it, knowing that even as I say these words, there are atrocious things that if they were happening before me, I'd probably risk my life to prevent. It would. It was happening right in front of me. But this is a good way to know what is and isn't for us. And to say, look, I can't go there. I can't reach that. And I can't, pardon me, I can't diminish what it is I need to do to be as functional as I can be in this place, in this time, that I can make my part of the grid work. So that if these people who are affected by this need to flee, I'm somewhere that the people are holding it down and can receive that. Now, for a long time, America was that place. Right now, I'm not so sure. There are a lot of changes happening, and we're so concerned about foreign affairs, while we've got a number of real crises here in America, and people here on the ground are so distracted by having their emotions toyed with by the news and media that they're like, I want to go help these people all the way over there. I'm like, hun, there's a kid got to sleep in the car and eat from a gas station on $5 that it's got to be divided between his mom and his brother. Like, why don't you go help those people? Go do the thing in real time you can do today. Like, that's where we need to be. And we need to be more active as citizens. And I have a lot of nerve saying this because I'm not particularly active. Like, I don't vote, for example, right? I know a lot of people can criticize me for that. And I have reasons for it, and I've been questioning them. I've been challenging my thinking because as a young person, I don't know that we should be that involved in politics. We're young and we don't even know how to run our own lives, no less a country, right? And then this is why you had to be a landowner to be in politics back in the day, because it showed you had a stake in the game, right? You had life experience in managing something and you had a stake in the game. And when we're young, we don't have much to manage and we don't really have much to lose and we don't have much experience. So I'm not sure the voting age shouldn't be like 32 or some stuff. But that being said, we need to be more active in the way that we hold up that which we can influence the most. And I think that's part of why I don't vote. Like, I want to be where I'm interacting with real people one-on-one, more than putting my energy into finding out who the representatives are and if they're of good character and if I can trust them to execute on their promises and which of those promises I can expect them to fulfill or end up dropping when they realize how complex the issue is. Because a lot of people will campaign being like, we're going to make sure this thing happens, and then they get in close enough to find out what the reality is on the ground and they're like, did I say that? Huh? The what? With the how? No, we're going to focus on these things. I want to be the XYZ president, right? So now you have people coming in and talking about, like, oh, I'm gonna end the war in this place, but then they find out why that's not as simple as it seems. And then that's something that's lost too. We spend a lot of time focused on, and we should vote. I'm really coming around to saying by the time you're in your 30s and 40s, probably should become more politically active. That's what I was saying about having to be a certain age and own land to be a president or to even be involved in influencing policy. I think you had to be a landowner to vote initially. So, right, you get to a place. But now that you have that power and privilege, I do think we should start to become more aware and more engaged. And maybe I will change that. But in the meantime, what I've been doing is understanding how that piece fits into the larger whole. And so, yeah, I think that I would be spending my time following the news, researching candidates, getting out to vote. And for some people, that's their passion. That's what they're called to do. And I'm glad we have people like that. We need all kinds of people. I think it's better for me to focus on how I can build functional microclimates around me that then could link out and form functional microclimates around them that could then draw in more people into that haven who could build that space that as things do go wrong and people need refuge, they can come into a stable environment, not one where the border is gaping wide open and people who mean us harm from all over the world are free to stroll in and out. um, I don't know how we're going to help anybody in the future. And for example, um, I think that turning our attention to that matter and being a little more focused, a little more targeted, and saying, look, we want to help people overseas. The best thing we can do is create a haven for them and be the kind of global influence that actually has sway in the world. I think America's becoming more and more of a joke over time, and it's harder to influence people as a superpower when you've lost influence and credibility as it seems we have. If we all focused on maybe electing the officials who would focus on those things, maybe we'd be able to create the environment where we can welcome people fleeing the horror, and we could establish the influence and the resources necessary for changing the reality on the ground at the level that ultimately these things do take large governments. I'm not a big fan of large government, but this is where at least a federal level is required to effect meaningful change in what's happening. And even at that, we still don't know. You know, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So even if we did get the politicians to take action and go over there and do a thing about it, I tell you, the things we don't know that sound really good in a soundbite, like we're gonna surge, we're gonna bring this to an end, like that affects real people here in our country in all kinds of ways. If a politician wants to go to a zone where there's conflict and stand up and say, we're going to do something about this, we're going to bring more troops here, there are going to be families in America that may not make it because ultimately they've got to give up somebody from their household, a mother, a father from their household, to go and fulfill that need. And that family's going to struggle here, right here, where we can do something about it. And because we're so focused elsewhere, we don't notice the struggle that that family's going through. We don't understand the reality on the ground right next door because we're so focused trying to understand the reality on the ground oceans, continents away, that we lose sight and we become weak ourselves. And so for people who are feeling powerless in the face of all the awfulness, my advice is to look around you and say, what can I affect locally? What can I do right here, right now? Are there people who are going to have to sleep in their car and live on $5 for dinner at the gas station? Are there military families with a parent who's been extended from a 12-month to a 15-month deployment with young children at home and a mother who has no support? Are we going to go and find the people who live 2 doors down who really need like love and support to get through a difficult time, that maybe doing a little food shopping would make the difference for them, right? These things, if we want to take action, let's do it locally, that we create healthy communities, because healthy communities create healthy states, create healthy nations. And our nation is not doing well. Our concern for others, it's like a bit of projection. We're like, oh, we're fine, but look how bad it is over there. And I think in a perverse way, that makes us feel a little better. Like, oh, well, at least we're not dealing with that. But let's look at what we are dealing with and how soon you can go from the top of the slippery slope to the bottom, finding yourself in that same position with no way out, and focusing on how, you got to get your own mask on before you help the other passengers. And this is true on a national level. And part of reducing the stress for me has been strictly limiting my exposure to the news and world events. If I hear there's something going on through, say, a meme on social media, I'll look up a few headlines, I'll get a rough sketch of what it is, and then I'll go where people are having really sound discussions, presenting various views, arguing their positions, and giving me a lot of insight into what underlies all of this. Because if we just follow the news, we're going to come away with what somebody else wanted us to think about it, feeling that we're informed, but we're not really informed enough to make a sound to establish a sound perspective that allows us to hatch an action plan that really allows us to affect some real good in this world. So, and I say good, let's define that as that which is supportive of life and its possibilities rather than counter to it, right? So, yeah, it's about finding what we can do and understanding what we can't. We talk a lot about boundaries and relationships. Think of countries as people and be like, that's what's going on in their household. If my neighbor was having a situation, how involved would I get? Would I send the police over? You know, and in some cases you would. You hear somebody screaming for dear life, you call the cops. But you don't go over there and try to be like, hey, listen, have you guys tried democracy? We don't do this, right? So I think that a frame change would really help people in managing the stress and overwhelm that the ongoing state of the human condition on a global scale will always bring to bear. It's always been like this. It's always, I don't know, maybe it won't always be like that, but we haven't made it to utopia yet. We haven't made it to world peace. And world peace starts with all of the people in the world being peaceful. If we can't be peaceful with ourselves, we can't bring about world peace. It's impossible. You could have everything in peace and come in and be like, I know, but I'm distressed. You're going to be the person tearing it down, right? So you really want world peace. Find inner peace. Extend that into the communities. And understand that actually we are doing better than we used to. Nobody's coming in here like hordes of fierce warriors with axes, spears, and arrows coming to like rape, pillage, and burn us out of our villages. That's not a reality we're dealing with anymore. And maybe this is some ancestral trauma of like, oh, we remember how bad it was. But, bearing in mind that we have made it a lot better. And in almost every instance that we've made it better, it's because we've created healthy individuals with healthy communities that have healthy economies, that give rise to good leadership and good values, that perpetuate more good leadership and more good values. And when we compromise that and we fixate on things outside of our control, we're abandoning the helm and coming off course ourselves, because we're moved. And yes, always keep those emotions alive and strong, but don't be guided by them. Be wise and sound enough to say, though I feel this and though I should and though I want better, I know that the best I can do here now is to focus on my own house and make sure we're strong, such that when it is time to maybe call the cops for the neighbor's disturbance, right, and make sure everybody's okay, we're in a position to be able to tell the police what it was we heard and what we saw and why we're concerned, and we're there to help if something should come of it. And this is the kind of thing where you wouldn't just want to open a can of worms on your neighbors and then not be able to be there to be accountable for your part in that. That's another thing. America has a history of showing up and being like, we're going to handle this. No plan, no follow through, and we end up leaving a wake of destruction that only makes it worse. And I don't think we should continue to accept that as a sustainable way of doing business as a world power. And I don't think we're going to stay a world power if we're so concerned about everybody else's problems. We don't address our own. And we can't really do that effectively if we ourselves aren't well. So we have to be clear, we have to be at peace, we have to be effective where we are, we have to stay present in reality. And what I said, one of the things that's really helped is cutting out the noise. So I'll go and I'll selectively pick the things that are obviously of great impact. These are the things historians will be writing about. I'll go and I'll hear the discussions, I'll get a picture of it, and I'll figure out in the end, if all the king's horses and all the king's men can't put this back together again, then there's very little I can do. And so that may not be the place for me, my energy, my attention, which is not a replenishable resource. You give your time and your energy and your attention, it's gone. It's woof. That's all you got for that round. And yeah, you'll get restocked for the next round, but what are you going to do with that? Are you going to keep throwing it down a dry well? Or are you going to go and start looking for a spring, right? And I think some of the anxiety and overwhelm we feel is that we're off our mark. We're not honoring the boundaries between our own nations and others. And I know it's so painful to stand by and watch these things happen. And part of this too, this has been going on, but we never knew about it. Now, because of our exposure, it feels like it's everywhere all the time. And I'm not sure it's not supposed to make us feel helpless, because when we're helpless and distressed, we buy the things that make us feel better. You know, we go for the fancy meal, we take the expensive drugs, you know, we do the work that's supposed to give us prestige and influence, and, you know, through that we get some peace of feeling empowered, and we do all these things because we're miserable. And what if we're just happy? What if we're just like, hey, I'm mostly okay. Happy's maybe not the word. Can't be happy all the time. But we can be in a way that we're centered, we're peaceful, we're clear, we're focused, we're effective. We can be these things, and we can create healthy environments and expand that outward. And basically, you know, you don't fight the darkness with a brick, you fight it with light. So I think we all need to work on getting our own light bright and like illuminating the world around us as much as we can. I heard Mother Teresa said something about if every person swept their own stoop, the whole world would be clean, right? Like, it's about doing our own part. It's about like tending to what's before us and doing that in a network such that all the nodes in the network are doing their thing and it all works, and the grid's not constantly going down in this place and the other. So yeah, to affect real change, we have to start within ourselves and expand that around us, and to then become more informed and less influenced. I think that's it. I think when we spend time arguing these matters and compulsively watching the news and thinking about all the horror in the world, we're allowing others to influence us away from what it is that we can influence. And it's making us all weaker. And I don't know how from such a weak position we can help anybody. Like, heaven help us if that's the course we're taking. We're going to need somebody to ride in and save us. And odds are they'll be just as unequipped and uninformed as we've been in our efforts to do that elsewhere, as other nations have tried to do in their time. Nobody knows us like we know us, and if we can work on that and become the most integrated and competent and sound and healthy and flourishing people we're capable of being, then that is the most we can do. And putting our focus there means that we have the energy and the attention to build that, rather than to stare into the awfulness of it all and go to get paralyzed and go floppy. So as far as it is with people feeling like I need to do something, I think we're being brainwashed away from doing what it is we can, and we could break the spell and come back and focus on where we are and what that means, and understand that everything has a ripple effect. And so start by being peaceful and saying it's not mine to be overwhelmed by. There's nothing I can do. I can't just get on a plane and go change this. I don't have politicians who can. I don't have a country that's in shape to do that. And it's because my communities are broken and the people within them are broken. And what we can do is we can reach within and reach out to others and rebuild there. And why don't we manage our own war zone before we worry about others? Just because this isn't military combat, it doesn't mean we're not living under conditions akin to war, where we're all divided and things are in disarray and the infrastructure is failing and the trust is failing and the mental health is failing, right? It doesn't take bombs to blow us apart. It takes influence. And so yeah, let's take back our own influence. That's my vote. Okay, so that's my much longer than I meant to be tangent on that. And I hope it's some good food for thought, and I hope we can all be a little more discerning and frugal about where we invest our energy and our attention and our sense of responsibility, because there's only so much to go around with what we can be responsible for. love is boundless. We can feel love and compassion boundlessly for all people, everywhere, all the time. But we have to act from a place of limited resource in the day-to-day world where we can actually affect change and be more considerate of those resources, be more mindful of that budget, be more accountable for how we allocate it and for what that yields, not just in terms of what we want to affect in the world, but how it makes us the kind of people who are capable of affecting anything in this world, right? Okay, so I'll leave it at that, but I hope that helps for anybody who feels that we need to do something about that. That is one of the most dangerous phrases in the world. Somebody should do something about that is usually the prelude to disaster. It is paving the path to hell with good intentions, and we have enough hell. Let's try to elevate and ascend beyond that. So, all right, here's to greater elevation. Till the next round. Bye bye.